Have you heard of the Carman Family Deaths? This is a twisty story full of doubt, assumptions, and perhaps a miscarriage of justice, all wrapped around serious greed and dysfunction. Sounds uplifting, right? How did a young man's survival at sea story lead to accusations he murdered two members of his wealthy New England family? Alongside input from friends and relatives who illuminate long-standing tensions and divided loyalties, interviews probe how compelling narratives of grief, wealth, and suspicion hardened into a devastating rift that forever scarred the Carman family. This is a very frustrating documentary to watch, not so much because of all the presumptive police investigation, but because of how the documentary is pieced together with its surprising lack of insight. The case follows an extremely wealthy family where Linda Carman, one of four sisters of a multi-million-dollar family, disappeared on a fishing trip with her autistic son Nathan. Now, right from the start, the police and all armchair detectives hone in on Nathan because of his regimented and seemingly sketchy responses after being rescued at sea, where his mom had also disappeared and then was presumed dead. Nathan's aunts, his mom's sisters, also believe Nathan is responsible, even though we only ever hear or see interview footage from one sister. And then to compound the hunches put forward by law enforcement and family, they also suspect Nathan of being involved with the death of his grandfather. Now, don't hear me say that I think the kid is innocent simply because he's autistic and multiple entities singled him out as the only suspect, ignoring other possibilities. I mean, the dude, he may be completely culpable. What's lacking from the documentary is all of the follow-up questions the documentarians either didn't ask or didn't include for us to see. For instance, there's video deposition footage of Nathan, clearly answering questions about both his mom's disappearance and his grandfather's death. But these are all choppily shown to us, edited so that they appear as though big chunks of questions and answers are omitted. I mean, portions where obvious and logical follow-up questions just simply aren't present, which would work to provide more context, I think, for the events, and then we'd be able to see how Nathan responded. As it stands, we get an incomplete picture of timelines and actions, given only snippets rather than cohesive thoughts. The other frustrating element of the storytelling within the documentary is that while on the surface the doc looks to be unbiased, or maybe at least attempting to stay that way, by not asking clarifying or proving questions of interviewees, the narrative becomes slanted. From prosecutors to Coast Guard investigators, even the FBI, and then the media, they all seem to have tunnel vision on a singular suspect despite lacking any sort of solid evidence. And to hear stories of the relationship Nathan had with his grandfather, and then in the latter years with his mom, the kid was active and loving with both of them. The presentation throughout the film, to its credit, does demonstrate how the grandfather was pretty much a cruel POS who was emotionally, even sometimes physically abusive to his family. And because of his business dealings, he wasn't always involved with the most upstanding of citizens. Multiple motives and possibilities bubble up as we hear the family members recount experiences with good old granddad. Once again, leaving me to wonder why the filmmakers didn't ask some clarifying questions when interviewing the FBI and other law enforcement. Now, I was happy this was a contained movie rather than breaking the narrative into episodes. The story, it's fluid and told from a coherent timeline perspective, so it's easy to follow, which I think is also why this becomes so maddening. The assumptions and preconceived notions that narrow the investigation become way more obvious when laid out in a continuous story presentation. Now, this is a tragic and sad story all the way around. Nobody from the family walks away unscathed. Everyone carries some kind of deep trauma, whether that be because of the abuse, the accusations, or just simply the loss. But strangely, what doesn't translate is the heartbreak or sorrow that should accompany a story like this. Now, I believe a lot of this has to do with the cold approach the investigations took when interviewing and pursuing Nathan. Because he didn't express emotions in a way they expected, law enforcement then doubled down on the suspicion, ignoring the possibility that they don't corner the market on having expert emotional analysis. Now, we do feel some grief from Nathan's father as he struggles to be both positive and optimistic despite the torment that his son underwent. The production of this looks wonderful. It's got crisp interviews that are all framed and lit well, sometimes giving an interviewee the unfortunate appearance of being artificial, or at least superficial, given all of their surroundings. And the case, it's intriguing and incredibly mysterious, with a lot of doubt that's cast on Nathan's innocence. And this is outside of the tunnel vision by law enforcement. I just wish that we had a more rounded examination that didn't leave me feeling like key pieces of testimony had been omitted or ignored. I'm resigned that the full truth just might be unattainable, but it's not a great feeling when I finish a documentary and it leaves me with just as many questions as it had answered. I'd be interested to see if another documentarian ever tackles this case and how they would approach the storytelling. Because if they were willing to include more investigative footage, regardless of how it painted Nathan and the family, at least we'd have a more complete understanding of this mysterious deaths. There's no sex or nudity, some profanity, and while no violence is shown, there are some extremely violent crime scene photos that are on display for us. Now, as a reminder, I don't give couch ratings to documentaries, but the Carman Family Deaths, it's not one that I would rush to watch. I mean, if you're into true crime, it could pique your interest, but it's not as satisfying or even in-depth as other examinations. So have you seen any great documentaries lately? I would love to hear some recommendations in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.